Horses Healing Hearts is one of Archways Hope Fund sponsors. We are lucky to partner with and work with this organization, as we know they do wonderful work. And Liz is going to tell us about some of that wonderful work. So first off, Liz, how did you get into this particular nonprofit work, in particular working with children from families who are affected by substance use disorder?
Yes. So I started this as an opportunity to pay forward blessings that were given to me. When I was 14, my mom was diagnosed with 6 months to live from alcoholism. The doctors ended up being off by 10 years. She lived another 10 years, but every day of that 10 years, I thought today's the day. So around that time, my stepdad, who also was an alcoholic but had recovered, sent me to his sisters in Pennsylvania, and she had rescued a Mustang and trained it to be 4th level in dressage, which I don't know if people know about dressage, but it's a kind of very high level training discipline in riding. And a Mustang is not a typical breed that you would see in dressage. So it was quite a feat what she did. And I remember at that young age just walking up to Jonathan, that was his name, and just seeing all these little white dapple scars on the outside of his body from having escaped through a barbed wire fence. And I remember saying, you know, your scars are on the outside, my scars are on the inside. You've been rescued and done amazing things. And I hope for that same fate, that I need a rescuer. You know, I need somebody to believe in me. So that's really when it's my love of horses began, and I attribute that love and the mentorship that I've gotten from several people as not only a saving grace, but literally saving my life. I didn't follow in the path of addiction because of that investment from people. And so I wanted to offer other kids that same opportunity that was given to me. So about 10 years ago, I started this group that was challenging because no one else had ever done a group like this. I mean, I kind of had horses in the handicap to emulate ourselves after, but we didn't have a barn. And I had $77 in the bank and 2 kids that I knew I needed to help. And 10 years later, we have less than $77 in the bank. We have a $250,000 budget, but funding is always, you know, a struggle. And we have helped, as you mentioned, hundreds of families, and also in the meantime started a social enterprise model where we help adults in recovery through equine therapy in a traditional model. There's no riding involved. And that has provided some funding for us to be able to help support, be more sustainable.
Gotcha. I appreciate you sharing some of your personal story with us as well. Can I ask really quickly too, what do you feel like you needed when you were young, that you also kind of provide to these children that you work with?
In a brief answer, when you're young and you're in that situation, you don't know what you need because all you know is it's kind of an oxymoron. Like, you know, you're different, you know, your family is very different. But then again, you think you don't really know what normal is. So I always wanted to know what normal was, and I wanted to be heard, and I wanted to know that I mattered, and I wanted tools to be able to work. I knew I was under 18 and couldn't get out of the house, but I didn't know how to cope with the situation. So that's what we give our kids. We teach them that their parents' disease is not their fault. It is a disease, and it's okay to love their parents. You can hate the behavior and hate the addiction and the substance use disorder, but love the parents. And that's a difficult discernment for adults to make, let alone children. But it's reality. So we teach them they're not alone. And we also explain to them there really is no normal. Like, I like to say that's like a knob on a washing machine. That's a load size. That's not, there's healthy and unhealthy and everything in between. So we try by having adult mentors there and volunteers who mentor healthy behavior. I had an interesting story one day. A 9-year-old came up to me and he pointed out 2 volunteers and he said, they're really weird. And I said, what do you mean? He said, they're fighting right now. And I looked over and I'm like, oh God, here we go. And I looked over and I said, they just look like they're having a discussion. He goes, that's what's weird. He said, they're talking about a movie that they both saw and one loved it and one hated it and they're not even raising their voice.
Yeah.
I said, okay, so what that tells me in your family is whenever anybody disagrees about something, they always raise their voices. He goes, well, that's the first thing that's raised, which led me to believe then it got physical. So to a lot of these kids, that's their pattern that they see is there's a disagreement, it gets loud, it gets violent, police are called, authorities come in, I may or may not leave the home, and there's so much trauma in that short amount of time. They don't understand that there are adults and kids and families and whole systems outside of their home where you can sit and have a discussion and say, Emily, you know what, I disagree with you and here's why. And you can say, Liz, you know, I hear what you're saying, but here's my point and maybe we can meet in the middle. Like to them, that you might as well be on Mars. They've never seen anything like that happen. But yet we as a society expect them to emulate that. So how crazy is that? You know, so we teach that.
Right. A lot of those, school doesn't necessarily teach you those coping skills in those situations with substance use disorder in the family or with mental health. So I think that those skills are definitely needed.
And some very real things we teach them as well. Not to interrupt you, but I mean, it gets graphic. I mean, there are times when we talk about safe people and situations and the kids say, you know, what if my dad, I know he's drunk and he tells me to get in the car? What do I do? So we talk about that as a group. Who else has faced that situation? And we had a kid share one time that he literally made himself throw up so his dad wouldn't let him in the car. But we tell the kids, if you can get away, don't get in the car. But if you know that the reality of you getting away is going to probably result in you getting, you know, physically hurt later or punished, or then, and you feel like you have to get in the car, get in the middle seat, put your seatbelt on, and be quiet.
Wow.
Your parents don't do anything because, you know, we know the middle seat, they're less likely to get the impact, and, you know, they're already impaired. We do not want them distracted in any other way. So it gets very real at times.
Mm-hmm. Those are hard conversations to have. I'm glad that you brought that up. That's a good example too. So tell us more about Horses Healing Hearts. What other kind of services do you provide? Probably about your equine therapy.
Yeah. So the children's program that was started 10 years ago, as you mentioned, it's a 2-hour session. Because of COVID, we're doing that virtually right now. But we anticipate Governor DeSantis has opened up the park or the summer camp. So our board will probably determine in the next, I'd say 4 to 6 weeks that we can start meeting in person again. So typically it's a 2-hour session where we give them a chance to go over their highs and lows for the week. And those highs and lows may be anything from I got an A on a test to, you know, my dad's on life support, he overdosed last night. So it's a wide variation. That time is so important because, like I said, at home, when you grow up in this home, you learn 3 unspoken rules. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. So HHH may be the only place where they feel like they can be heard and they can share, and people really are there to listen and hear them. We teach our volunteers about reflective listening. We teach them how to not try and solve these kids' problems. They don't want that. They don't want to be pitied. So there's a lot of training that goes into being there in the appropriate, healthy way for the children. After the highs and lows, we go into the curriculum. We have an evidence-based, and then we have another one that's more hands-on. And, you know, a topic may be putting bags or a book bag with rocks inside of it, and there's feelings written on the rocks. And the kids get to carry the book bag around not knowing what's in them, but then we open it up and pull them out, and then we explain to them many of their loved ones had that baggage of all of those feelings, good and bad, prior to them even being born. So that's another kind of underlying reinforcement that it's not their fault. And then it's also the contextual, I'm not using the right word there, the hands-on approach and explanation of how beneficial it is to get the feelings out and how it's lighter. So after the curriculum, then they all take turns riding. They each get about 15, 20 minutes to ride. And while kids aren't riding, if it's before their turn or after their turn, they're doing games with other volunteers, like board games or arts and crafts. And then at the end, we come together the last 15 minutes and we have each child share their 3 words for the day. And that may be something from, hot, bumpy, the stupid horse wouldn't go. And stupid horse wouldn't go is all one word, of course, long hyphenated word. But, you get stories too. Like I had a gal one time say, I was learning to canter today and I learned that the horse is really like the balance in life, and they're so deep. I think this girl was maybe 11, and she said the trainer showed me there's a bucking strap there, like a little leather strap I can hold on to if I get scared. And she said, in a lot of ways, HHH is like my bucking strap, because I know you're there for support. I know I can be here and grab on, and it keeps me balanced, but I'm also able to ride. So kind of a metaphor for I'm able to get through life, but I have this assistance, and our goal is to make them and not independent per se, but we don't have control over whether their loved one is going to get sober or stay sober. So we want to build self-efficacy and really give them a toolbox that they're going to use the rest of their lives, regardless of whether that mother or father finds sobriety.
Mm-hmm. So explain to me a little bit more about how working with the horses, how does that help both the kids, and then also you said you were working with adults too. Yeah. So what is the therapy there? Tell me a little bit.
Yeah, before I get to that horse question, which is a valid and very common question, there were 2 other programs, the equine therapy, which we do with adults in recovery, and that's with a model called EGALA. And then another program we just started called LEAD through Equine Assisted Development. And that's for actually businesses to bring team members in and work metaphorically with the horses. So why horses? Why do we use them, and how does that healing take place? So horses are a prey animal, and their field of energy, if you will, is about 80 feet. So their predator would be a lion or, natural tiger or something. They know 79 feet out if that lion is faking sleeping or really sleeping. Well, what does that mean, or how does that translate to us? So they want us to be congruent. They want our outsides to match our insides. And if we're not, if on the outside I'm like, hey, Emily, how are you doing? But inside I'm miserable, that horse can sense immediately that incongruence. And it transfers to them like, if you can't be honest with yourself, what are you going to do to me? Because they're prey. They're constantly focused on surviving. So they are immediate feelings detectors and authenticity detectors. So when people go in there, and I don't think we realize how much of the day that we go through, and we aren't really connected with our bodies. We're not really being who we are. We're kind of stuffing it down because, face it, it takes a lot of energy, and not always fun to deal with those emotions. So it really gets the person centered and grounded in dealing with who they are and what's going on. And the horse will connect when someone's speaking their truth. There's something spiritual, and I don't mean to woo-woo here, but it's hard to explain unless you've been around horses. Their presence is just, it's humbling. To think of this animal that now that it's domesticated, it's entirely reliant on us for food and to clean the stall and to take it out and all of that. But think of how the horse has been used by us for so many years, back in battle and years where we've gone through wars. Horses instinctually knew that violence and that chaos and danger was ahead, and they carried their soldier into battle fully knowing they'd probably die. I mean, you talk about loyalty, and it's really, really emotional. But the horses have this in really incredible intuitive sense. So when people feel that connection, it's very powerful. And a lot of times people will they'll kind of just start tearing up or get really sensitive, and they get a little freaked out because they're not really understanding why. And we just try and be really down to earth and say, you know what, it's okay. Like, there are no right or wrong answers in the arena. We call it the arena of life. And things are going to come up, and we just go with it. You know, a lot of it reminds me of Brene Brown. I don't know if you listen to her at all. Well, but she talks about vulnerability and courage. And we always thank the clients at the end of it and say, you know what, you showed up today. And to walk in an arena with an 1,100-pound man, well, 4 of them, and not know what's going to happen, but have that vulnerability, which is really courage, is huge. And the ones that really do well in the program, a lot of them we find are also doing well in their recovery program.
Mm-hmm.
So did I explain that well? Do you understand?
Yes, definitely. How long do people stay in your program? Like, how long are the kids in the program? Are like the businesses, is that a day event or?
The children's program, it used to be that we'd allow them to stay forever. We've had kids who've gone through it for 9 years. Now it's about a year and a half, depending upon their home situation. The clients in recovery that we see, we have about 4 different treatment centers that we really only get to see them 1 to 2 times, just because of what the census is at that center and how they're cycling from residential to IOP. And with the businesses, that's been really interesting, because some groups we've just done 1 time, but what's happening now is the groups, it reminds me of like those reality shows where they go in and they redo a bar or a hair shop or whatever, because when you bring change to a group and a team, a lot of times they'll go back and start sliding into their old habits. So the way that we tend to design this process now is we have our first session, which is 2, 4, 6 hours, and then we book a follow-up session within 3 to 4 months as kind of a refresher. And we bring the notes from the last time, and they're like, oh yeah, we did agree to do that, and what did that look like in the arena? And so we kind of refresh the things that they discovered, and the impact and their commitment to those new decisions that they've made about their team. They're very powerful because they designed them. They were hands-on with the horse, and it was their idea. You know, we don't know their business. All we can do is sit back and say, so I noticed that happened. And then the team goes, oh yeah, that does happen in the office too. And what can we do about that? Is that working or not working, or what's a better way to work with that? So it's really fascinating. I think we've had a few companies that we've done at least 3 or 4 follow-ups, and it does keep getting better and better.